All right, welcome everyone to the April meeting of the Portsmouth Conservation Commission. First thing on the agenda is approval of minutes. Did anyone have any comments or edits that they needed to make to the March minutes? If there is none, would someone like to make a motion to approve those?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the March 12th, 2025 meeting as presented.
Do we have a second?
I will second that motion.
Okay. And something I wanted to bring up real quick before we do any voting. So in the past couple months, Kate has noticed that we've been missing some hands because they go up and down very quickly. So if you could keep them up until we've kind of made a count. And I'm also going to do, we're going to do for, against, and abstain. So if you want to abstain from the vote because you don't feel like you have enough information, not recusing, but abstaining from the vote, you can raise your hand for that too. So everyone should be raising their hand for something and holding it up so we can count. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay, so we have a second for the approval of minutes. All in favor? Great. Okay, that was easy. Thank you.
We follow directions well.
Next on the agenda, we have a request to postpone for 224 Kate Street. Would someone like to make a motion to request postponement to, I'm guessing, the May meeting?
I will make a motion that we postpone the application for 224 Kate Street until the May meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Great job. This is so easy so far. All right, next on the agenda, we have wetland conditional use permit application for 80 FW Hartford Drive. Is someone here to speak to that? All right.
Maybe we postpone until later in the meeting? Sure.
Sure. We can
Take it out of order.
take it out of order and move it to before other business.
I believe it's a follow-up on something that happened last year when we were informed of all those trees getting cut.
That
It
was actually
two-
the adjacent property.
It was, but there were trees that
Yes.
were cut on 80
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
So, do we need to make a motion to postpone
Probably. Are we postponing to the end of the meeting? Yeah.
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 I'll
now?
make,
Or just to take it out of order?
I'll make a motion to postpone it at least till the end of the meeting. See if somebody comes to speak to
Second.
it.
Second. All in favor? Great. Okay. Next on the agenda is the Standard Wetland Bureau application dredge and fill for 50 Andrew Jarvis Drive. That one, John Shagnon did say he was gonna come to that.
Yeah. Yep.
And we just keep move that down the line too.
So, yeah. Started a few minutes late.
I know.
I'll make a motion
Take it out of order.
to take it out of order. Yeah, I can make a motion to take the 50 Andrew Jarvis Drive out of order and move it down on the agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Guys, we're flying. Okay. All right, then we have another request to postpone for the dredge and fill, Beverly Hill Road and Greenleaf Avenue.
I will make a motion that we postpone the dredge and fill major impact State Wetland Bureau application for Beverly Hill and Greenleaf Avenue to the May meeting, Kate? Yes.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Great. Okay, Matt, I think we're ready.
Thank God.
Now we have the State Wetland Bureau application, major impact for 255 Gosport Road. Look at you, just skipped right ahead to the front.
Good thing I was on time. Okay, everybody hear me okay? All right, good afternoon. My name is Matt Carden. I'm an environmental consultant working on behalf of the property owner at 255 Gosport Road. So this is for a standard dredge and fill major wetland permit application for a tidal dock located at the property. The property fronts Sagamore Creek as one of the properties in Gosport. There's currently no dock or any type of wharf at the property, so this is a new application for a wharf. So the proposal here is for a 6 by 200 foot permanent pier connected to a seasonal 30 by 4 gangway, connected to a 10 by 40 float on float stops or skids, and there'll also be a 15 foot by 6 foot ramp accessing the pier. So the major wetland permit application is for impacts to freshwater wetlands, impacts to tidal wetlands on the property, and there's also a waiver request for the the overall length of the structure. DES in their standard design rules limit the overall length of a structure to 200 feet. This is going beyond that in order to reach sort of navigable water for the use of the pier. So just going over some impact numbers. There's a proposal for impact to the tidal buffer of 55 square feet, proposal for a permanent impact to freshwater wetlands in the amount of 247 square feet, and then the proposal for a permanent tidal wetland impact of 969 square feet, and then there's a seasonal impact with the gangway and the float totaling 620 square feet. So that's in total 1,836 square feet of wetland impact, both fresh and tidal, and including the seasonal parts, and then 55 square feet of buffer impact. To kind of go over in detail, okay, you're on the next page, beautiful. So the property has an existing dwelling on it. It's sort of a, typical backyard, maintained lawn, and then it kind of slopes down to where the sort of the freshwater wetland and the tidal marsh extend from the property boundary out to Sagamore Creek. You'll see on the bottom left-hand corner, there's a sort of a wetland drainage swale that crosses the property line, and then that freshwater wetland drains into the tidal portion. So that's why there's impacts to both freshwater and tidal wetland, because from where the start of pier is on an upland area, it traverses over a freshwater wetland portion, and then towards a tidal portion, which highest observable tide line was delineated. Is fairly diffuse. There was no topographic change. It was really mostly based off of rock line and vegetation species specific to a tidal marsh. So you can see there's a rock wall there shown. That's kind of start of pier. That's essentially where the start of pier is. To the left side of that is the access ramp, and that lands on a bona fide upland tidal buffer. And then that ramp will get to the pier, and the pier extends 200 feet to the salt marsh, and then there's a gangway, and the gangway extends past the edge or the leading edge of the salt marsh down into the mud flat, where there'll be a float. There you go. That's a much better depiction of it. There's a total of 34 permanent piles that'll support the pier. As far as construction goes, access will be solely from the water. So all materials and equipment will be via barge, staged out, floated in during high tide, staged out beyond the salt marsh proper in the mud flat on spuds, and then equipment and matting will be placed, or matting first, where the dock will be, the pier, and then equipment will be traversed along that matting. And that equipment will be used to drive the piles, and then it'll be sort of a boardwalk for construction workers to place the stringers. And once the stringers are on, everybody will be working on top of the sort of the superstructure to lay the decking and the rails and everything like that. So the goal is to get in there, drive the piles, put the stringers on in as quick as possible, and then pull the matting out, and then work will be done all from the decking of the superstructure. The seasonal components will be floated in or brought in by barge and lifted and hoisted into place. So the gangway, 30 by 4 gangway, will be placed pre-assembled off-site and then placed in once the superstructure is built, and the same with the floats. Whether the floats be on float piles or they call them skids or kind of stilts on the float is to be determined. I like to keep that up to the contractor, but you know, potentially getting input from DES on that. It's written up both ways. It's shown here with float piles or float stops. Some other details of the application, you know, kind of going through the requirements of coordination between the Port Authority. We have a letter in the application from the Port Authority saying that there's no adverse navigability impacts with the proposal. And then additionally, there's correspondence from the National Heritage Bureau in there. So there were no hits from Fish and Game, but there were a number of species found, rare species that came up in the National Heritage Bureau report. So there was correspondence back and forth with Maddie on that. That's the microphone. And there were some natural communities, high, low salt marsh, intertidal, flat, and salt marsh systems. And then there were also 5 endangered species listed. And so there was correspondence back and forth. And there was a survey done by myself out there looking at glasswort, marsh elder, and then there were a few other species. I'm sorry, there was a total of 4 species. There were the 2 other species identified: salt marsh agellinus, a flower, and then a tundra alkali grass. The agellinus was determined that, just from my assessment, it's known to occur in salt pans, and there's really none where the impact area is. It's pretty thickly vegetated with different types of spartina and then glasswort on the leading edge. And then the alkali grass, talking to Maddie about it, it's a historic presence about a half a mile away, and just sort of describing the site to her, she felt pretty confident that it's unlikely to be at that site. So I think we've done a pretty solid due diligence in terms of reviewing for rare and endangered species, and Maddie's feedback was to try to reduce the overall impact over the salt marsh, which I've made an attempt to do that in the design. You know, it's a long ways to go to get to the navigability portion of the creek, notably. But in terms of trying to reduce that impact, I've tried to make the length as short as possible by making up for that with a seasonal gangway to get down to it. So you can see how we stop pretty well short of the edge of the salt marsh in that starred hatched area, and are really just landing the float just beyond that edge. So that was the attempt to try to minimize the impact. She had also mentioned trying to reduce the number of pilings. I have 12.5 spacing on the superstructure itself. Anything beyond that gets tricky from a construction standpoint, so it wasn't ideal to increase spacing. If you were to go to anything beyond 12.5 feet, so 15 is like not really even doable unless you were to use steel and some pretty robust design. But anything above 12.5, which is not ideal from a construction standpoint, you would eliminate 1 pile bent, so two piles from that analysis. So, you know, like I said, that's not favorable from a constructability standpoint, and then it's just, you know, the having a stable enough structure by expanding the bents to reduce one pile bent wasn't ideal, which is why we didn't do that. Other items I could mention, you know, sort of standard procedure. We have a turbidity curtain that'll be placed prior to construction out along from the start of pier out beyond the float and kind of doubling back. that'll be in place for the duration of construction. And then other than that, other than equipment traversing over the salt marsh, I don't expect any major impacts or erosion control issues. It's a relatively small piece of equipment, an excavator with a vibe hammer on it to drive the piles, and the matting will be placed to disperse the PSI over the salt marsh. So I don't expect any rutting or anything like that during construction. There were no other time of year restrictions with this being a site above mean low water. There were no fish concerns or anything like that within the water column. And then no time of year restrictions associated with the vegetation out there. So in terms of schedule, I guess if anticipating receiving permits at some point in the midsummer with construction starting soon after that. I think that's mostly what I wanted to cover, and I'm here to answer questions.
Great, thank you. Questions from the commissioners?
I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about how this dock is going to be used. This is just a single family, and then what kind of activities do they anticipate doing on it, and how are they going to get down there? Like, just talk a little bit more about the use.
Sure. Single family lot. It's single, family currently owns it. Young kids, fairly young family.
Permanent, like full-time residents?
Yep. Local family. The anticipation, from what I understand, is to have a boat down there and to be able to access the water. They have technically a waterfront lot, and I think, they're relatively new to town, so I don't think they've had too many seasons to be down there, but I think they have visions of bringing their kids down and being along the water, and this is a means of getting them past the salt marsh, in an elevated sense and down to the water where they could access a relatively small boat. In terms of getting down there, there's sort of a footpath already down there to get to the salt marsh area, but there's nothing sort of official. Right now, the footpath kind of goes through the skinniest part of where the wetland swale is, and the wetland, it's shown as a jurisdictional wetland. It's really more of a drainage conveyance. There's not a lot of wetland characteristics in terms of your typical wetland plants and organic soil and very poorly drained soil. It's not so much that, it's more of a conveyance, but with it being a conveyance, it wasn't so much of a stream, it was more of a wetland, so that's why it's shown as such. But yeah, I think that's the intended use.
And there isn't a dock that's shared by, I guess maybe other people know this, but isn't there a homeowners association that this home is a part of, and don't they have some coastal access already?
Not that I know of, and there was
Okay.
nothing in the deed that stated such. So unless I'm missing something and somebody knows more about the neighborhood, usually when there's something like that, and I'm sort of just speaking in general terms here, and just reviewing other dock projects, when there's like a home association that has a joint use dock, there's it's usually deeded. There's usually a deed restriction on the individual lots, or like a larger part of the HOA where those individual lots aren't allowed to have their own personal dock, and it's in their deed. And there was nothing like that in this deed.
Okay.
And I don't know of a common dock. As part of the DES application, you're required to sort of do some due diligence in terms of trying to reduce the amount of docks on the waterfront and work with other property owners nearby to see if you can get double usage out of a single pier. That's generally a good idea to reduce impacts on the waterfront, but from a liability standpoint, it's never really favorable and kind of is sort of a non-starter once you start talking to neighbors.
Yeah, you are right about that, Lynn. There is a community or a city easement for public access, a few houses down the road. That's for the whole city, for residents and for the public, but I think a lot of Tucker's Cove residents use that pathway to get down to, I don't think there's a dock down there, I think it's just access,
Just a
water
nice access spot.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm thinking about like that Starfish neighborhood. Do you know what I'm?
Sea Star.
Yeah, maybe Sea Star.
I think it's,
Yeah, wasn't that part of there? So maybe I'm confusing the two neighborhoods.
yeah, I think this is Tucker's Cove.
Yep.
Can you talk about the size of the float? The need for it to be 40 feet long?
Yeah, I mean, typically you like to right size it to like a vessel that they have. To my knowledge, they don't have a vessel, but in the design rules, a tidal dock design standards go up to 400 square feet. And so that's what we propose. If there's a reason why DES thinks that's unnecessary, then we'll scale that back. But generally, you go up to 400 square feet. And, in this sense, it because of the riparian zone that's allowed by the property owner, we couldn't do it perpendicular, so that's why we kind of do it all in line. But it's really just a function of what is in the DES rules, of what you can
So
have
You're just
maximum
asking for
allowable.
the maximum allowable,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
And then over that for the length of it, which is why you're asking for a waiver.
Yeah, yeah. Having a smaller float wouldn't eliminate the need for the waiver.
No, but I mean, having the longer one doesn't get you out into any deeper water,
Correct.
so
Yeah.
But it does allow more boats to be moored there.
you'd have 2 slips, almost 4 slips if you.
Yeah, 4 slips.
Yeah, you
'Cause
have
most
a-
boats are 20-ish.
A slip, though, technically is 25 feet according to
Yeah,
the rules,
but-
so like almost 4, but.
Yeah, I mean, you're maximizing the allowable use of the structure by having a larger float. You could put more vessels, you could do 1 on each side, possibly fit 2 on one side. But yeah, you are, maximizing what you get use out of.
And at this point, you don't know what size boat they're going to put there?
No, I mean, it's going to be limited to the, I actually, I shouldn't say anything because
Yeah.
this is sort of my opinion, but I don't know.
Okay.
My concern about the size of the float is about the possibility or the need for other boats to come up there, because we've seen it happen, and I live by the water. Oh, I don't have mooring, can I be on your float? And then it becomes a permanent thing, and 3 boats end up being there permanently.
Can you say that again? So you're saying other people in the area come up the area
They
or
won't
live
come
nearby?
up, but like friends will ask, "Oh, you have a dock. Can I moor my boat there? Because I don't have a mooring."
I see. Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's to the discretion of the property owner and the property of the owner of the dock. And I've seen people sort of rent slips, dock space to other people. So I guess that's a possibility.
But then
There's-
we come out of personal use because it becomes commercial if you're renting a slip.
Is that true?
Well, if you're renting it, there's revenue in there.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I'm
don't know
thinking
what the
if it's
rules
like a
are, but-
residential lot
Yeah.
and somebody rents a unit of a house, that doesn't make it commercial, does it? I don't want to be
know
argumentative.
what
I'm
the
just
rules
thinking
are.
out loud. Yeah. I see your point, though. I mean, it's. I suppose it's possible, and I've seen it happen in the past. I don't think there's anything in the rules that disallows that, and I don't know that I would totally say that it would be considered commercial, but I don't think there's precedent on that. I think there is rules. There's a definition for commercial, and it doesn't address renting a slip like a private slip.
You're most likely right, but that would increase the traffic there and the disturbance in that part of the.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't disagree with you that.
I know this particular little cove in the creek, and so I'm just trying to understand, with this length, that dock will always be floating in water. It will never be, you're pushing it out that far, am I understanding that correct?
No, the dock will be elevated, the pier.
No, I mean the float.
The floats.
Excuse me, yeah.
So the floats, so by requirement, they need to be 2 feet elevated from the substrate.
Right.
And so that's why the float stops are there. If you can see two pilings, two sets, or I'll say 4 pilings under the floats. And that's to elevate them or suspend them above the substrate when you start to lose the water.
Right.
So actually, the floats should never be like laying on the substrate, but they will be floating when there's enough water. And then they're seasonal, so by law, they're required to be removed seasonally. So the gangway and the floats will get pulled out and stored off-site.
So what does that mean for the boats? If the floats will never be in the water, does the tide come out to where that float will sit far enough that the boats will wind up in the substrate?
Yeah, the boats will be on the substrate, yeah. And that's pretty standard for, you know, a tidal dock that doesn't have deep water access. You know, it's required to keep them 2 feet above the substrate, but then whatever vessel you put next to it ends up being on the substrate.
I appreciate that. I'm trying to picture that particular channel and how far out you'll be, and knowing that it's a pretty narrow channel when the tide is out, so that float will be filling a fair amount of that space.
Yeah, the reason why we are required to coordinate with the Port Authority is for them to make a statement on whether or not they'd be a navigable impact in the overall channel to the public.
I don't see that. You're kind of tucked away in there. So to Stuart's point, if there are multiple boats parked in there, so you have a couple of boats on a large float at low tide, that's a fairly significant impact or disturbance to that little cove in there off the main channel. I know there's a ton of seabirds and various things. Those salt marshes are fairly large. I actually just walked along part of the public property over there today. So, I'm just thinking of size and magnitude at low tide of what's going to be sitting in that space.
What is the depth of the water under the float at mean low water?
My computer went to sleep. I'm going to look at it here because I can't read that very well. So at mean low water, mean low water is negative 4.14. And so you essentially have, mean low water is not much different. But you'll have, mean low water is way below the mudflat. So
What about mean low water?
also below the mudflat.
So there's no water under the dock at mean low water?
Yeah, it's a mudflat dock.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a requirement that for you going out that far, you're trying to get to where your dock floats at mean low water.
Yeah, I think the length requirement is 200 feet, and the rules are kind of funny, and I think there's might be a gray area, or achieving a floating dock at
Right.
mean low water.
Right.
So-
And you have to go out even further to achieve that.
It would be impossible, and you
Okay.
would never meet it here.
Okay, so you're asking for a length that still doesn't achieve that other part of the
Right. Yeah.
requirement, I guess is,
Yeah.
we're gonna call it that.
Yep.
Okay.
I've in my number of years of doing this, I've never proposed something with that requirement of a pier meeting going so far to meet floating at mean low water or mean low water. It's always generally been 200 feet as like sort of the standard max amount of length.
So do you know how much of the tidal cycle they will have water enough that they can move their boat?
I do. It's about 16 hours in a 24-hour cycle. That'll be half a foot of water on average. Tides
foot of water.
half a foot of water or more. So just thinking kayak
That's
or
a
whatever.
paddleboard, like,
What's that?
that's, yeah, a paddleboard, but,
Paddleboard and a low drafting boat, a bay boat or whatever, half a foot to a foot of water, and then that'll be on the first maybe hour of that cycle, and then beyond that it'll be 16 hours throughout the 24-hour day.
okay. All right, thank you.
Yep.
have a question. I mean, I'll be candid, the thing that I'm the most concerned about here is the salt marsh. I mean, this is a prime wetland. There's clearly a lot of special species that are popping up in this, you know, the Natural Heritage Bureau species check. We know salt marshes are an incredibly fragile and incredibly sort of threatened habitat with climate change and with everything else. I'm just having a really hard time wrapping my head around this project. I guess two things. Maybe you can just tell me a little bit about what steps you've taken to try to minimize the impact. Obviously, shading is an impact, construction's an impact. You've talked about construction, but have you thought at all about shading? Have you done any analysis of like how much of the day is going to be shaded, or the spacing between the planks makes a difference?
Yeah, no general analysis done in terms of like sun aspect and shading. Generally speaking, when you're designing a dock and sort of just going by the rules on the design standards that DES lays out, you're required to have a 1-to-1 ratio from the salt marsh or any substrate to the height of the pier or the lowest point of the pier.
Yep.
So that'd be the stringers at the bottom. So with this design, we're meeting, 6 feet of height from, it actually ends up being the freshwater part of the wetland, which is closest to the rock wall landward side. And then that 6 feet's maintained along the length of the pier. So that 1-to-1 ratio is met throughout. And then in terms of light penetration on the structure itself, there'll be 3/4 inch spacing between all the decks.
And
So
how wide are the planks?
1 by 8, and then 3/4 inch spacing.
8 feet, or 8 inches, I'm sorry. This
Yeah,
way.
7.5 inches,
3/4 inch.
and then a 3/4 inch, which is again another design requirement per DES's design standards.
And I guess, the way I read the DES rules, they're pretty clear that they will not permit anything that would be considered a boardwalk over a salt marsh. And that's what I'm seeing in this design. Do you have any reactions to that interpretation?
No, I guess I'm not that familiar with what they'll permit in terms of a boardwalk. I sort of focus a lot on tidal docks, and
Right.
it's been my experience that not every case, but in a lot of cases, to get to where your navigable portion of your water body is, you sometimes have to traverse over salt marsh. And so that's, an impact that comes along with a tidal dock. And they, in my experience, if you meet a lot of the design standards, DES has a tendency to approve them, because that's kind of how their rules are laid out. Within reason. I mean, I think there's times where there could be improvements, and that's the application process. You submit a design to DES, and that's your mechanism to receive feedback. So if they have concerns with that, it being more of a boardwalk scenario or something like that, we'll surely take their comments and try to implement them.
I mean, I think based on that, I would not recommend approving this, or recommend sending a recommendation or whatever, the actual, yeah. I mean, I think there's a pretty strong case to be made that this, anyway, but we're moving into the discussion phase, so I'll let other people take
have a
questions. Yeah.
Question, if I may. I didn't catch, are we aware if there are other similar structures anywhere in this neighborhood, anywhere else?
There's other docks in that neighborhood into Tucker's Cove. Nothing to that length.
Look at the aerial.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
this is
so
way
there's-
back here. Most of them sit closer out
Okay, that's helpful. I didn't.
into the creek. So this is
So this
unique
is like
'cause
a
there's nothing-
substantial
Yeah.
delta between, okay, thank you. I didn't notice
Yep.
them in the picture.
Matt, I had a question about what you said about the access and the hours of access. Did you analyze or figure out what would the access be if the dock was 200 feet or shorter? How many hours compared to the 16 hours, I think you said?
Oh, yeah, so,
What's that?
well, the where the floats are to get to the mudflat portion, which is really the navigable portion of the water body, we can't move it any more in, like we're as far out as we can go.
Substantial area.
And it's all, once you get to the mudflat, it's relatively flat, so moving it, going further out, or even bringing it in by a foot or two, which is really, I think, I mean, I'm like, you know, like any typical salt marsh, you have the vegetated portion, and then there's a pretty abrupt drop down to the mud flat, and the proposed floats are just offset from that mud flat, or from that transition. So moving that isn't going to change it much. And then I tried to get the longest gangway I could without running a risk of the gangway hitting the mud flat, you know, to try to reduce the amount of pier. So we've tried to do you know, within reason, you want a little bit of space because of, you know, some tolerances there, but I've tried to create the pier short as possible by getting to a float that's as tight to the mud flat as possible, generally trying to reduce the overall length of it, given the circumstance, the site constraints that we have. But with all that, there wouldn't be much change in the durations of access to navigable water. It's all pretty flat. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I
Okay.
had one more question. You had mentioned that you thought it was kind of a gray area on the access part at mean low water, as far as, I think you did, I don't know. So your interpretation is that they don't need to have a boat floating all the time in the water to have the waiver?
Oh, so you're referring to the DES's requirements for length, design standards for length, and I think, is that what you're referring to?
Well, for the waiver, for the extra 30 feet that you're getting.
Yeah, so without having it in front of me, the design standards are essentially, you can't go beyond 200 feet. The rules are that a tidal dock structure shouldn't exceed 200 feet, or that to access your float to be floating at mean low water. I mean, those aren't exact words, but that's generally how I understand the rules. I think it's 606.06.
So you're not meeting either, it sounds like.
No, and that's what the waiver request is for.
I have a question. I know you extended the abutters property lines to make sure that the dock was, I don't know if it was within 20 feet and you had to get a signed off from the abutter, or if it was outside that 20 feet from the property line extended. But what about, like, you know, as you go around that cove, right, there's people that I feel like if they were to do a dock would, like, perpendicular into that dock, or is it just not reaching far enough out?
No, that's a possibility, and I don't exemplify it here. But when we met, sort of pre-application, met with Kate and Peter to kind of go over this, that was something that Peter brought up that I hadn't thought about. And so I had done a review of that, and in some cases where you have sort of an acute cove, right, with property boundaries sort of converging,
Yeah.
you know, how you define, for everybody's information, how you define the riparian zone that whatever waterfront property owner has a right to, is you extend those property boundaries away from the land into the water body. And in some cases, those converge, and sort of, you know, you'll have limitations there with how you can do that. In this case, and if I may, I can't speak and point because you won't hear me, but.
There's a pointer up there. Or you can bring the microphone
Okay,
with you.
look at this.
You just can't touch the screen.
Okay, can you hear me? So, this is our property, thank you. So this extends generally this way, this extends that way, and then this extends out here, this extends out here, and so, you know, eventually they all do converge, right? But where we're proposing the float, which is generally somewhere here, you know, they don't converge. And if you go back to the plan, thank you. So here's the property boundary, here's the 20-foot setback. And so where they do converge is far out in space here. So that ended up not being an issue,
Okay.
but I certainly respected the comment.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
mean, obviously, this is extending well beyond their property boundary. Like, I actually don't know who owns that marsh. Is that, city? Is that state? Is that, right? I mean, you see their boundary does not go all the way to the water's
Yeah.
edge.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I can
I don't know.
You do
maybe
know? Sorry.
provide some insight.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's generally owned by the public. And so through this, so there's a couple of things happening. For waterfront property owners, the state of New Hampshire generally has a charter agreement for waterfront property owners to have a right to wharf for properties that are frontage on water, public water. But through that process and through DES's rules, they acknowledge that it's considered public property. And so that's why they have these design standards. And then a further level of that is you go through the PDA, Port Authority, and they weigh in on its impacts and effects on navigability. There's some other rules in the DES's regs that address some of the potential impacts on public navigability. Like you can't have a sheer wall. It has to have piers and it has to have flow if, somebody needed to pass through for safety reasons or whatever. And then sort of lastly, last year is that these tidal dock projects, in addition to it being a major permit application, have to go through the governor executive council for approval. So once you get DES's application approved, it has to go through another level of approval. And that, from what I understand, is really to review it from a public impact standpoint.
And that's for tidal structures specifically?
That's for tidal docking structures, yep. It could be for freshwater docking structures too, but that's not my focus very often.
Right. So public lands and public waters are impacted in this case.
Yeah.
And just to make sure I'm reading this correctly, the orientation of the dock is basically east-west, right?
If you can scroll up,
Base.
yeah, north is up, so, yeah.
And I think it's just worth noting, apparently, a north-south orientation minimizes the amount of shading that happens underneath the dock, which isn't, I mean, obviously you were constrained here on what you could do, but I think it's worth just noting that's one of the downsides of this particular design.
Okay. Yeah, you can see, we didn't have a lot of, I mean, even if we had that option, it would have been a great point to consider, but the design constraints are pretty tight here in terms of, how far you have to go to get to water, navigable water, and then your latitude within the property. You can move within those 20-foot setbacks, but that requires getting a butter sign off, which I don't know that would have been an issue, but it didn't seem advantageous to go one way or the other in this case.
Does your waiver is that also for footprint? Because I know the requirement is 1,500 square feet, and you're at 1,720 from the HOTL. I'm
Is
assuming
it
that's probably also-
1,500?
I have the maximum overall footprint of the entire structure serving a single residence must not exceed 1,500 square feet seaward of the highest observable tide line.
Yeah, I think we're under that from the highest observable tide line.
Okay. I think,
We're at a total of 1836, and there's 39 feet.
yeah, you might be right. I might have done my math wrong.
And then there's I might have done my math wrong.
No, I think you might be under. I think I did the full 200 feet of the pier times 6, but it's not the full 200 feet of the pier. It's 200 feet minus 39, so it's 161 times 6. Which is this one?
For fear of doing public math.
Right.
I'm afraid to do it now, but I do recall doing this calculation during the application, but
I can figure it out. Hold on.
Why do you reduce the length of the pier for that calculation?
Because the requirement the whole 200 feet and the 1,500 square feet footprint, they have it start at the HOTL, at the highest observable tide line, and then go seaward. That's just what the requirement is. It doesn't start from where the pier starts.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah, the pier is 966, and then
Yeah, so I'm at
Plus 400.
1486.
plus 120. Yeah, okay. Whew, just made it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions?
I guess I have one other question. I'm just thinking about the life cycle of a dock, right? Where will the float and the ramp be stored?
So when the site allows, they get stored on site, meaning like if there's a sandy beach or something like that, something that's not a vegetated organic marsh, they could potentially be stored on site, or if they could get hauled up to like a bona fide upland. But that's generally not the case on most sites. So typically they get hauled off and stored at a yard somewhere. So there's companies in the area that's kind of what they specialize in, is they winterize and spring commission docks, and they'll haul the float off and store it in a yard somewhere that I'm not privy to.
Right.
But, yeah.
Is your client comfortable with that, absorbing that expense?
It's a requirement. It'll be a permit condition. Yeah. I didn't ask the question, but it's an assumption I had made, but it'll be a permit condition for sure.
There's no further questions. Would someone like to make a motion so we can enter into a closed discussion?
I mean, I can say I'd recommend 255 Ghost Fort be approved so that we can move it into discussion mode. And I don't think we need to go through stipulations right now. Let's go into discussion before we do that. Is that okay?
I think that's fine. Yeah.
Second.
Okay. What are people's, commissioners' thoughts on this? Who would like to start us off?
I'll say just a couple of comments. I'm not nearly as familiar with these particular situations, so I'll say that right off the bat. I can understand why a homeowner would want to do that on a waterfront. This obviously isn't just a waterfront. This has, as Lynn pointed out, a very sensitive area to it. So to me, that changes the dynamics a bit. I'm concerned about the length in that particular space. I'm also concerned, and that was in full transparency, my colleagues were pointing on the map where the other docks were so that it's on the record. I'm concerned that if you look at the other houses that would have an equal desire, that don't have those today, to extend out in a similar manner across that, and that doesn't sound like there's, at least we're not aware of conversations that they've had or anything that would encourage them to limit that to a single item. I'm concerned that this could open it up to much more perturbing of that area. So I'm not strongly supportive of it for those particular reasons, is what I'll say.
Yeah, I I agree with that. I think the fact that it's prime wetlands is important here. You know, I understand they're looking for a waiver. They're exceeding the 200 feet, and yet still not getting to water underneath the float at mean low water. I just think you're not really getting anything for such a long, impactful structure.
I'm kind of in the same position. I'm conflicted. I understand the desire to have such a structure. I also understand that it substantially raises the value of the home, but it also feels like a lot of disruption for probably something that's not going to be used very often. If people are working and their children in school, it's weekends for 5 months of the year. It's a lot of disruption for potentially not much use when there is access to the water, as Kate pointed out, within reasonable distance.
And I think we can make the case, right? I think the prime wetland piece, I think, is a really important thing to mention. I do think we should consider this a boardwalk over a marsh, which I think will kind of kick it into a slightly different review for DES. And then there's significant buffer impacts here, which is our jurisdiction. And these are permanent buffer impacts, and that buffer happens to be freshwater wetland, and they're going to be traversing across that every time they want to use the dock, plus just the dock structure itself. So I feel like that's another point that I think we can make that falls within our kind of purview.
Technically, docks don't, and structures that go with docks, like piers and pilings and floats, but
why not? It is a buffer impact, right?
it is, right, it's just not jurisdictional for the city, so
It just
this is
gets,
why we
they get a
only-
special sort of
this is what-
exclusion for
mostly
docks.
'cause they go through DES anyways, so we
Yeah.
don't have jurisdiction.
Maybe not if it's a boardwalk.
Right. And I think also given that it's a sensitive habitat on the upland edge too, and that is our role, right? Our role is to be kind of the local sort of knowledge and sharing that with DES, who doesn't have the ability to go out and look at the site and doesn't know Sagamore Creek the way a bunch of us do. So I guess I think we need to kind of paint that story that this is not just a typical dock application. This is like a very significant thing. And it's going to set a weird precedent. Because we know all of those property owners could also do the same thing and are not going to be intimidated by having to go all the way up to the governor to get approval, because that's the kind of thing that's in their capacity. And that's not this is a public resource, it just feels like shocking to me to contemplate this much impact for one family in a public resource that's so fragile and so important. So I don't know. That's where I'm at.
I would just sort of reiterate the same thing about the boardwalk and the impacts to the marsh. And then also the point that was made out, I forget who made it, but the two floating docks are going to be, their two floats are going to be blocking the channel pretty much. I know that the water flows underneath and that they're raised up, but they're still right in the channel, and there's not a lot of opportunity to get around them, especially, during the tide, that they're sort of on the verge of trying to access the water when they might not be able to otherwise. So I totally agree. There's a ton of impact here for just one family's use, so.
What was the motion? The motion was to recommend approval? Okay. Pull out your little handy thing.
Oh, yes, if it's
Go for the comments.
The motion,
it would be
okay.
denied. Unless it's withdrawn.
Does anyone need more time to mull it over?
Do we want
Talk
to
about
have,
some ideas?
right? Yeah, did you want to have conditions, even if we deny, or at least comments?
don't know if it would be appropriate to put conditions on.
Right,
if
I'm
it's
thinking more
denied.
comments.
Oh, if it's a
Yeah.
motion for approval. Yeah, sure.
It could be nice to provide comments
Yeah.
to DES.
Yeah.
We have that ability, right? Isn't that?
Yeah.
I mean, I think our comments would be prime wetland, kind of the precedent for the other property owners on the cove.
Could we consider, because we're talking about a lot of impact for one family, so if you make the float a tiny bit bigger, you said that the slip was 25 feet, if we make it up to 50 and then make it open to other homeowners, we avoid the possibility, or we're closing down the desire for others to have that same boardwalk, and we're still giving people access to the water, which is one of the values of those properties. Would that be?
Yeah, there's something about how many slips, if you have a certain amount of frontage,
Yeah.
you're allowed only, I don't know where it is now, but like, I think it was 2 slips maybe for every, I'm not gonna find it when I need it, of course, but. So then if they had 4 slips, I don't, like, I don't know how that would work, because I don't think,
It's a suggestion
Yeah.
to find a
Yeah.
compromise.
yep.
I think liability might be an issue too.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
that, but can be recommended and it can be determined by.
I mean, I don't think I feel comfortable doing that. I mean, I think we could say something like, you know, we'd recommend that this whole Tucker's Cove community get together and find the least impactful place and the most appropriate place to put a public dock, if that's what they feel like they need and they want to put their
Yeah, that's
resources towards.
probably a better recommendation. It
Yeah,
doesn't Create
yeah.
a
This is not
It's
where they should
such a
put it,
tight-
you know?
liability
A
or
tight
something for
cove.
this particular owner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking that also.
And there is a road, like you said, leading down to the water, so, you know, like they could make the decision, I guess, to work with the city to develop that or something, I don't know.
Yeah, there's probably a better place in that entire cove than right there where it has to cross all of that.
Yeah.
Yep, there's also the Sagamore Headlands property, which is just on the corner where Jess probably went for a walk the other day, that does have a float structure seasonally that people
Yeah.
can bring their kayaks up to.
Yeah. So I think we could point some of those things out, like that's not going to be obvious to the DES, person who reads this
Yeah.
application. Then there's 2, right? There's this amazing piece of land that the city owns, and then there's this public right-of-way that's
Private
just
one over here.
3 properties down.
That's a great point to convey.
Yeah, I mean, and this property, like the value of this sort of waterfront property is partly just the view, right? Which is like stunning. Like it is stunning. And that dock's not going to help anybody else's view, So I mean, if you're really if it's about protecting private property rights, like I think we're also preserving the view for everybody. And we're not infringing upon that value, right, of this home. They get their view. I don't know.
The point that we made about, and it's made in several different ways based on the readouts and reports, I think the specific sensitivity of this resource, to my way of thinking, as this goes up, probably pointing, I mean, I know it's in there, but highlighting that was a top concern that we had. I suspect that over the other things that we've said, that's probably a higher point that they could consider themselves, whether or not it should be done. I guess that's just my way of saying we shouldn't just assume that they're going to read that and conclude the same thing, and that a good portion of our deliberation was about the particular sensitivity. We're not trying to deny the owner or the neighborhood or anything else. It's concern about the higher sensitivity of that resource than other resources that would be able to do the same thing that we'd probably consider with much less hesitation.
And there are quite a few marinas in the area, right? I mean,
Yeah.
been to a couple of them recently. Yeah.
And that it's a permanent, as whoever pointed out, right? It's likely a permanent impact.
Yeah, When can you imagine if there's every single property put a dock in across that beautiful wetland there?
Well, and that's where,
The whole thing's going to degrade. I mean, we're going to lose that wetland. You know, I mean, if there's that much shading from every single property, putting a boardwalk across it, and that's not good for their property values either. Like to lose that protection that the salt marsh provides.
from a secondary, beyond the sensitivity of the resource, that was my second biggest concern. I can easily see the other people going, oh, well, we didn't really want to have to go through that process, but now that it's done and we know that it went up all the way and even to the executive council and got approved, why not, right? And if all that area were impacted in the same way across, that would definitely be very negative.
And it wouldn't be fair for us to approve one and not the next three.
Well,
You know what I mean? Like that's
it
not
basically sets a
what you want from your
precedence that,
authorities.
yeah. So that's all I have to.
Are you ready for a vote?
Do you feel okay about the comments, Kate?
Yeah.
To write a
Do you want to
letter?
So,
go over it?
yeah, I think in the normal letter decision, whatever the outcome is, we'll also say, please refer to these comments below concerning our decision. And I can outline a lot of, prime wetland, salt marsh, very sensitive, seems more like a boardwalk with the spacing. I wrote down more, sorry. Mud flat, not gonna have sufficient water to float for a portion of the year or a portion of the day.
I think other amenities to get to the water.
Right.
Public
Yeah.
amenities are
Public
available.
Other
amenities.
public accessible.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Access
accessible.
ways.
Yeah.
I mean, would they care about the precedent
Yeah, I
thing
don't know.
too?
Yeah. There's no way this marsh could sustain access like this for every single
Right.
homeowner. And so we feel like the fair thing to do is to just have a,
Or just, you can think of it differently, right? It could cause a multiple negative impact to the same highly sensitive
Yeah.
area. If the precedent, doesn't matter in a different discussion, just the fact that this could very much result in 5 or 6x impact.
and that it is protecting both the view and the sort of shoreline stability for the whole neighborhood too. And I think it probably would get challenged by somebody in that neighborhood. So maybe we could save DES some trouble by encouraging them to kind of step up and look out for the good resource.
Do we feel confident with those comments? Is there anything else that anyone wants to add in a letter to DES, regardless of our vote? Okay, then let's do it. All in favor?
In favor of sending that.
All in
Motion
favor?
to
Approving, it's a
Oh,
motion
never
to
mind.
approve.
Recommending approval.
So.
Do you want to make a separate motion to send? Well, let's vote on the first motion first. And
Yes,
if
okay.
it's
Motion to approve.
a denial in the
Taking
end,
my hand
then we'll
back.
make a motion to send
Exactly,
additional
right.
information.
Okay, so this is the motion to approve.
Okay, wait.
Okay.
So it's a motion to approve without any of these comments?
With the
The
comments.
comments would go
Okay.
regardless, because we're recommending
Okay.
approval,
The
right?
comments would normally go with recommended approval or recommended postponement, would include comments. Denial, usually it's just denial. You're not really supposed to give, well, you can give reasoning, but
I think we should give reasoning.
you
Yeah.
might not even need an extra motion for that. If,
No, if our motion.
oh, I guess your original motion was just for approval.
Which if it fails, application is denied.
Okay, so let's just make a second motion in the case of denial,
Right.
just to be safe.
Exactly. I know.
Okay, so this
Yeah.
is, this one is the motion to
Approval.
approve.
Right.
Okay, so all in favor? Okay, against? And then abstain? Nobody, because everyone voted. Okay, good. So now what do we have to do?
Now we make a motion to send
Our comments?
our comments
Okay,
as a separate.
so would someone like to make a motion to send our comments?
Yeah, I will make a
Yes, with
motion.
our
Make a
recommendation.
motion to send the comments that we've listed with Kate to the DES.
Is there a
Second.
Anyone want to discuss that? We're good with the comments, okay. All in favor? Okay, good. Everyone raise their hand, we're good. Sorry, that was a little confusing. Okay,
That was tricky.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, what do we have? So what did we first postpone?
ADFW Hartford.
Is anyone here to speak to ADFW Hartford?
I'll need to recuse myself on this one.
If you want to go sit in the audience, just so there's no confusion. Thanks. Okay. Hi.
Good to see you all again. So I am the property owner, Julian Fry of ADFW Hartford. My father-in-law and interim subject matter expert in sustainability, Steve Barndollar. So this has been about 18 to 22 months that we've been working with you guys, and this is kind of a phase 2 project. The initial aim of phase 1 was we took down 4 pine trees in our backyard with the aim of putting up 36 solar panels. We were very insular in working with our HOA and did not realize that there was in fact a wetlands buffer zone until Kate notified me. We then worked with a wetland scientist by the name of Mark Jacobs to, I guess, update the delineation lines. Am I saying that correct, Kate? And please keep me honest in all of this. So we worked with the wetland scientist. He came back and basically said that he updated the lines and it did not show a violation. We removed trees, or I guess while removing trees within the 100-foot buffer, it does not require notification to the planning director. So you're probably wondering why I am back here in front of you today. And if you could scroll down, it will help tell the story here. And then we can scroll back up, but keep going, please. I'd like to just get to the pictures if possible.
Sure.
And if you could actually go up one more. And one more? Sorry. Okay. So we took down, like I said, 4 trees. You all can do math. Obviously, that's a lot more than 4. This is tied into our neighbor, Ash, at 90 FW Hartford. And kind of where this got a little sideways is, so obviously you can see aesthetically not pleasing whatsoever. We removed all of these. If you now scroll down, and you can take a look at the standing water that we have. These are all kind of recent, and we haven't had that much rain. In working with Kate and working with Peter, as we understand it, if we were to grind these stumps, we do not need to be in front of you all today. We are not interested in doing that. I would like to excavate these out and put in a rain garden of sense. I'm not looking to build a structure. This would be all natural. We're working with an individual. I apologize. His name is Alan from Northeast Landscape. He couldn't be here today. We can call him on the phone if need be. But he is kind of a true subject matter expert. He originally, he's done one of these for Lonza not too long ago. The point that, again, I would like to stress, I'm not looking to build any type of structure. This would be a natural way of diverting the water. And, you know, obviously you look at this water, we're very worried about my kids. They were at one point trying to paddleboard back there. I was worried they were going to drown in that. But more, I say that half kidding, more like mosquitoes and everything else. So that's what brings me here for this phase 2, is the desire to excavate these stumps out and put in some type of drainage system. And I'm not sure if there's any other pictures if you scroll down, or if that is the I guess that's all of it. Yeah. So if you scroll up, those were the trees that we worked with Mark Jacobs with. If you could go up a little bit more, there should be some type of detailed information in terms of how he is suggesting doing this. It is a little bit of an iterative process with him. Like we'd have to start this to identify exactly what this would look like. The first step would be testing the water tables to see if this is even remotely possible. Steve, you have anything to add?
No, I'm just, my wife and I are concerned with infestation of bugs. The water, probably 6 months of the year, sits in that culvert area. So the proposal that Alan Pearson is making, and he's done it before, is to do a rain garden, which my understanding, this area is approximately 150 feet from the start of the culvert back to the wetland area in the back of the property, and about 15 to 18 feet wide. So they would excavate, slope both sides, make it into kind of a dry well for the full length, put in a stone and fill in the bottom part, and then add fill to the property to make sure it's draining away from the house. In the springtime, correct me if I'm wrong, the basement at 80 Hartford is 3 or 4 inches of water in the basement and has to be pumped exteriorly. And right now it's sitting in that culvert or sitting in the property, so it's the back part of the property is wet. So I think this, although it's more expensive, certainly about 3 times versus just grinding the stumps, it's a worthwhile project. It would not just beautify the product, but with absorbent plants help to mitigate the rain that stays in the property, as I said, about 6 months of the year.
Yeah, exactly right. And then I'll stop with the sob story here, but Steve's absolutely right. This has extrapolated the water that's coming into the house. The sub pumps are running nonstop. And then, yeah, obviously would plant any trees and, native species. Area of recent cutting, those 2 areas that you see there, that is in the blue, the one just parallel in between the 2 houses is where the rain garden, for lack of a better word, would be going.
While we're looking at this map, could you point out where the culvert is that you're talking about?
Yeah, the culvert.
Oh,
Can you
you're
take
gonna-
the
you're gonna need to-
microphone with you?
Oh, sorry.
Yep. Thank you.
And then just don't touch the screen, but yeah, sure. And where is it, Steve? Just because I know you've spent more time with Alan. Yeah. So all, exactly.
There's a pipe?
There's a culvert.
Is that what you mean by culvert? Like a underground pipe?
No. When you say culvert, the only piping that would be there would basically be the piping running from, I guess, the gutters. But no, you're digging down 4 or 5 feet, filling this with crushed stone, and then putting soil on top of it, and then native trees above that. Probably not the right word.
Yeah, okay.
No piping.
Okay. Or,
All natural.
and then from the gutter to that area, it would be like a stone
Exactly.
swale? Is that
Exactly.
what you're picturing?
Yes.
Okay. Just make sure I understood. Okay.
No, I appreciate you articulating that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wait, what is the other area, the other purple, blue?
The other blue is where trees were. But there's also water. That's when, if you scroll down, when you see the 2, right? I thought one of them was actually a video. Yeah, so you're seeing it here, and then all back here, and then obviously.
But you're not doing anything in that back area? Is that?
As I understand that, it would be pitching it back, but it seems to be the majority of this water is all runoff from over here and going that way, because that was never a problem before.
So you didn't get standing water when the trees were still intact?
No, ma'am, nothing like that. We had, to be fair, some water in the basement, no standing water. And these pictures, in some ways, do not do it justice. Like I said, the kids were literally paddleboarding.
A nice little skating rink in the winter, maybe.
You know, if it wasn't for the sub pumps running continuously, yeah, it could perhaps be not quite waterfront properly like the last gentleman who was up here, but yeah, you could do something.
Yeah, I mean, the trees are really powerful, right? Because they're constantly sucking water up into the atmosphere and, releasing it. So a rain garden isn't going to be quite as powerful as that group of trees was, just to kind of keep expectations in check is my thought, but.
Understood. This is exactly why this committee does what you guys do, without question.
I had a question. It wasn't entirely clear to me. I'll back up and say this. When I look at that substantial amount of water, and as you've described it, I mean, it's sort of clear how it's happening and why, but certainly I'm no expert on design, but it would make me think you would certainly, since now this is accounting for a problem that wouldn't have been there, you want to get it right? And so at least to me, it would seem like you would definitely want a pretty careful analysis of where that would have to be placed and how it would have to be done in order to have the desired, and I would want an expert to conduct that analysis and to design that. And so just from my perspective, I guess I'm jumping ahead a little bit. I would need to see that before I would have any ability to know that I should recommend, approval or not. And I just wanted to make sure. I don't think you've had a chance to do that yet, right?
I think if Alan was here today, he could definitely articulate that and give you much more detail in terms of what he's thinking. But as I understand it, it is, again, somewhat of an iterative process. Like, he needs to start this to test the water tables. Sure. But you're absolutely right, Brian, in terms of, I don't think this is something that you want to just grind these stumps.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's a lesson that we're even trying to instill in our kids, that this is something you want to do correctly.
Yeah, I'm glad that you have that person engaged. It's unfortunate that they couldn't be here, because it would help a lot to understand that. I understand that they just can't be, but I would.
Yeah, he's happy for me to call him, but I don't know if that's something that this committee is interested in hearing on speakerphone.
Yeah, I think maybe let's see first if people have other questions and come back to that.
Yeah.
I have a question. Is this area even in the 100-foot buffer based on your new delineation from Mark Jacobs?
Kate, I believe one of the trees was in 75 feet.
Because if you look at the plan that Mark Jacobs put together, it's my understanding that the yellow, the like tan, orange, yellow area is the wetland now that Mark Jacobs delineated.
Correct.
So 100 feet from that would be the new 100-foot buffer, which isn't shown on there, I don't think. And so just kind of based on other measurements I see on there, like, it almost doesn't even look like that area you're talking about is in the 100-foot buffer.
I think you're right. I think on the trees, yes, I think you're right. But I wanted to make sure we were covering all of our bases this time. And as I understood it, if we were to grind the stump or excavate the stumps, we would come back in front of you. But yes, I think that specific area, you're correct in saying that.
So then I'm not sure, I mean, unless we have a legit
I think it would just make it easier to know exactly where this rain garden is proposed, because if it goes further past where the stumps are, back by Ash's shed, like at that depth into your yard, then you'll have more impacts. But without a plan with the exact location of the rain garden, it's hard to tell where the buffer impacts will be and where you'll be right outside the buffer.
And it sounds like you can't, the first
I can't
thing-
defer
Right.
to Alan, and it sounds like he can't, as I understand it, who's been to the
Test
house multiple
water
times,
tables.
is he needs to test the
Yeah.
water. Yes.
Yeah.
But yet somewhat, I don't want to rush it. Brian's absolutely right in doing this correct, but it is, it's not the best situation between Ash and us in terms of, so we're incurring the majority of all of the cost of this, and it is just something that, we're a little time sensitive about in terms of how much patience we will have with it.
Yeah, that's understandable, but I mean, we'll talk about more about this in our discussion, but for us, it's really important to know
I get it.
exact
Yeah.
amount of impact, and that's impossible to know until it's drawn out on a plan, which sounds like it's impossible for you to know until the water tables, that's
Until he starts
tested.
yeah.
So I think we'll decide as a commission kind of where we want to go on that, but just so you're aware of kind of,
It's,
Yes.
hard.
Is
Yes.
there a segmental way that we can approve to allow the process to start?
Does it even require approval, though, for that part of the process?
for just
Checking the water
testing.
tank?
To analyze it and
Oh,
to?
no, for testing, no. For
So
doing test
that's what
bits?
I was going to say. It seems like, and I understand the urgency to get through it. It sounds like you could proceed with the analysis and produce a map and a plan, and then if it does in fact infringe in the jurisdiction that we're responsible for, you could come back to us, and if not, you don't need to, unless you just believe that there's need for our guidance, which we're always happy to provide, but we don't want to hold you up either.
Yeah, and I was disappointed and totally on my fault for not getting the information to Kate, and I missed the opportunity to have you guys out the other day, and that's on me.
I don't know that it would have actually helped us to
Yeah,
see it, because
we're
I
just,
saw it.
we're interested in getting you
before.
guys
That
back.
That analysis and plan, I think, is your most important next step, and we would need that to proceed, so I don't see any other.
Yeah, I guess the question that I don't really know the answer to is what testing means from this person. Like if it means excavation and stuff like that in order to figure out like the breadth of how big it needs to be, then that's one thing. But if it's just like doing a little bit of
Like a core sample.
analysis,
Is it
then,
test
Yeah,
pits?
good
I mean,
point.
what,
right, I don't.
like a percolation, Barbara?
Normally it would be-
Exactly where this is going to be going.
Percolation. But
Which, like, what, can you explain, or can someone explain, like, what does a percolation test entail? Like, how much digging
it's usually not very much.
Okay.
right? Yeah.
And is it in multiple, like, locations done?
Well, it's where you want it to be infiltrating, so it would be wherever, and maybe there'd be other places that you would want to check, because, I mean, typically, the rain garden doesn't go where the wet area is, and he may have said that would be like the last place. I mean, you definitely don't want to do it because you want it to infiltrate, and the wet area is not going to allow that. So you'd want to have the rain garden somewhere where the water drains to that wet area, so it could infiltrate. But he would need to do a perk test to see, and a soil test to see what the composition of, but it's probably pretty obvious that nothing's infiltrating there, I would say, from your experience. So the dry well idea is not a bad idea, but you probably don't want it to go right there.
Right.
Yes, yeah, he had said the same thing, just like, and that's the tricky part about water, right? It goes where it goes.
Yeah. You want to try to avoid it getting there, because you're not going to get it out of there. I had a question about I can't remember what the neighbor, because that whole piece is part of yours and part of his, like that whole wet area. So what was he doing with that? We should have.
The property line is literally right through the middle. What is he doing? I can't completely, obviously, speak for him, but he is not interested in pulling the stumps.
Right.
And, that's kind of a deal breaker in putting any type of drainage system in place in the first place.
So he was planting trees, I think, as far as I know.
In the back.
That's on the back. You can't even
Okay.
see that here. That's probably 20 trees. I would imagine, like I said, it's not really an open line of communication so much right now, but yeah, I think he's planning on grinding and then just putting topsoil. Which, to Brian's point earlier, like I think that's a Band-Aid fix when you need a shot of penicillin, so to speak.
And you're talking about he's thinking of doing that in that area that we've just been talking about, not the back.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. But, he's like, hey, if you guys want to do this, yeah, go for it.
Okay.
If it ends up where you want to go, that it is within the wetland buffer, we'll need a letter of authorization from the neighbor saying that you can build on his property. Or do work, sorry.
Yeah, not build, but yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Okay.
So how do we want to
Be tough.
proceed with this?
So it doesn't seem like there's, after we investigate it, there isn't something that we have to approve. And I don't understand what approving it even does, really.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe postpone to the next meeting and have them just see if they even need to come to the next meeting based
That's
on
what I
the
was
delineation
thinking.
and the 100-foot
Look to
buffer
Kate
line.
that knows kind of the process better than I
Yeah,
do, but
this
that's what I
probably-
was thinking.
This probably should have come as a work session, but if it turns out that whatever structure needs to be built is outside the 100-foot wetland buffer, then we'll just have you withdraw the application.
Right.
But if it ends up being that the rain garden probably needs to be pushed farther back so that water can reach it, then that will probably fall within the 100-foot buffer, and you'll just have to submit revised plans showing that exact location.
Yeah, like they're changing the drainage at all to
Right.
drain out to the wetland or something like that, if that was your intention, then, right? We would
Any
have to
different
see it.
grading, yeah.
Yeah, grading and stuff.
And just to be clear, it's anything that would be considered ground disturbance, right? Which is the regrading, the digging, laying down, gravel or whatever.
Moving
But does that
stones.
include planting trees? Like if you just wanted to put in some, whatever, dogwood, something that was kind of wet tolerant?
That's kind of the funky part, is that we allow, at least staff allows tree plantings and like vegetation plantings as long as it's native. But, yeah. Yeah, it's mostly soil disturbance that is the only thing that we really,
Okay. So they could, in theory, like do the soil disturbance part outside of the buffer and then do whatever, a little additional planting in the
yeah, a line of plants.
100-foot buffer? Or you're not comfortable with that?
But would it be helpful? Yeah, would it even do
Yeah.
anything?
I had a couple comments, I guess. I don't know, for them. I mean, I don't know. I had it's sort of a question, because you had not plans, but you had a list of plants for the rain garden. I would just like to say that was a really nice list of plants, and maybe planting those other places too would be great. Because they all like water, and you probably dry up the area. And the woody ones, you had bushes and stuff.
Yeah,
That was great.
I gave you the blank like because it doesn't mean much to me, but yes, we understand those are the best ones for. So, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm glad to hear you confirm that.
Yeah, and you might want to get somebody that specializes in stormwater management to help you with this. Because you don't want more water in your basement.
So just to be clear on what the applicant and what we are doing. We are postponing this application with the intention that he move forward outside the wetland buffer with whatever testing he needs to do to determine if the rain garden needs to be within the wetland buffer and if he needs to come back to us in the first place. Because if your garden is completely outside that buffer, then you are at our jurisdiction. So you wouldn't even
100
need-
feet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you wouldn't even need to return here potentially next month.
And then the application could be withdrawn.
But if it is determined that the garden is within the 100-foot buffer, then you would need to come
this
back
all
here
over
and
again.
talk to us next month.
Yep.
And on that note, I would just add, I agree with Barbara. I loved your list of plants, and I would make a small request regardless, you know, it's kind of out of our jurisdiction, but when you're considering your geotextile that you put down, avoid plastic if at all possible.
Avoid plastic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, so then, are we at the point where someone would like to make a motion to postpone?
I will make a motion that we postpone the wetland conditional use permit application for 80 FW Hartford Drive to the May meeting as indicated based on what you determine where the rain garden needs to be located.
And a clear line by Mark Jacobs on that, a plan showing that 100-foot buffer, so that it's well-known whether it's in or out.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, I don't know their availability, but
But she wants Mark to determine whether it's in or out of the.
yeah.
wetlands.
Hoping we can just get
Yeah.
Alan to do it, and yeah.
Yeah, he just needs, does it need to be a signed, like, plan by Mark showing the 100-foot
It'd
buffer
be
line?
preferable to have him stamp it, but I'm sure he already has one that he did, that he just, that he can just write on, because what he did was in MapGeo, it looks like, so he can just go back in and superimpose that and put a line on. That would just make it
Yeah, so
easier.
I would just ask him,
Oh, no, so he might already have it.
He might, or if he doesn't, it should be really easy for him,
Okay.
I would think, just to pop a 100-foot buffer on that.
But is that all that would be needed, or you would want to show where the rain garden is actually going on there also?
Right. Also, plans for the exact location, dimensions.
of the rain garden. So that it can be determined whether or not it needs to come in front of us, or we can just remove you from the agenda if it doesn't.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion, just.
Okay. We've
we're-
kind of
we're
been
into
discussing
comments.
already, I know. Does anyone have anything else to add on this one? Okay. So all in favor of postponement to the May meeting
The comment?
with the comments?
Okay.
Brian, did you have your hand up?
Yep. 6
Okay, just making sure we got everybody. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that back to us and erring on the side of caution.
Yeah.
Even though it could slow you down a little bit. We tried to make it expeditious, but we appreciate you both being here.
Yeah, no, of course. Learned our lesson the first time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we postponed 581 Lafayette. Is that what we're on? Yeah.
I'm gonna step away for just a second.
Thank you. We didn't have to motion to move, to see them, right?
Did we?
Do we have to
I
motion?
don't
to
think
see
so. The motion was just to take it out of order.
Thank you for postponing us till the end.
Sorry.
Sorry for the late arrival. Madam Chair, members of the Conservation Commission, John Chagnon from Haley Ward, and Sam Hayden was here last month, and he then filed the minimum impact expedited application without your signature, and I think you're gathering here today on this application to make some comments to the New Hampshire DES. So I did see the tape of the meeting, and I wanted to follow up with a few salient points in regard to your discussions last month. The first is that this project went to the Trees and Greenery Committee, and they, like you, are a very judicious, authorized Portsmouth board, and their whole charge is to look out for the trees in the city of Portsmouth. And they did a very extensive deliberation on this project and determined that the plans that we submitted were appropriate. The amount of tree cutting was in line and approved the plan. So they looked at the number of trees that were going to be cut. If you've been out there, you've seen the extent of the invasive bittersweet on the tall pines and the other invasives on the site. So the Trees and Greening Committee does look out for trees, and we did get their approval. As far as the lighting goes, that lighting is going to be owned and operated by the Portsmouth School Department, and they're going to be in charge of the timing of that, and that is going to be to provide for the safety of the people that need to access that path to get to the school from Ledgewood Drive. Currently, there are people that do access the school from that part of Lafayette Road, and they cut through a neighboring property. The neighbor has not stopped, but that is trespassing. And as far as completing the 581 Lafayette Road project, which is going to be a housing project, somewhat workforce and affordable. The project got some relief in order to be constructed at a higher density, and that relief involves doing some off-site improvements, and that's the reason why this path is part of that project. So the developer is filling a need, which is to provide better pedestrian access from that part of Lafayette Road to the high school. Then I noticed that you're still talking about alternatives, and what I handed out to you is the landscape architect Terrence Parker's sort of conceptualized design plan that he brought forward to the Trees and Greenery Committee to talk about trees that were going to be saved and then some plantings in order to enhance that area. And the green line I highlighted is the property line. Starts at the top left of the page and goes down, takes a 90-degree right turn, goes over and takes a turn back towards page down. And then the yellow line with sort of the X symbols is the chain link fence that separates the school playing fields from the sort of the inside and outside. So inside the fence is controlled space, as Sam mentioned, that involves keeping the public from transversing it and destroying the fields. There's also ticketed events that require admission. So the school department did not want us or allow us to put the path anywhere else. So as you can see, there's no way to avoid this impact. Given the property line and the fence, the only place to put the trail is where we have it. So hopefully that answers the avoidance and minimization question. In regards to the comment about spanning the wetland with a bridge, this is not a trail. It's not a sort of a walk. It is an access that needs to be maintained for access in all seasons. The intent of the school department and the width that we created is so they can drive plow trucks and keep that operational in the winter during snowstorms. And that's not the kind of thing that is a boardwalk. You know, we could appreciate boardwalk designs, but those are not designed to have vehicles with plows on top of them, and that would extend the cost, but also the school department is going to be taking this over, and long term they do not want to maintain a bridge, so to speak. So I hope that answers, gives you more information, but I'm here for more discussion, and we hope that you just write a letter in support.
Great, thank you. Questions from the commissioners?
I wonder if you could just kind of talk me through this. For whatever reason, the version that's online isn't, I don't think, the most recent plan set. So could you just kind of talk me through where the trees are getting added?
Yep, so I don't know if you have the whole plan set, but what I handed out shows you the trees being added. So
Yeah.
there's a row of trees that's going to be added on page right,
Yep.
going up and down at
They're all
the
new additions. What kind
back side of the church parking lot. And then there's an area to the south of that that currently has a lot of trees that are in decline, some of them from bittersweet, and then there's some other invasives in there, so the invasives will be taken out. There's a 24-inch pine that's going to be saved, but then the other plants are all proposed. So this just is the removal plan. This is not the plan that shows the landscaping. This is the one that you have there.
Oh, sorry.
That's the landscaping plan. So you see the circles?
Mm-hmm.
Those are proposed plans.
Okay, those are the new ones, the new
Yeah,
additions.
so this plan, the first plan is trees to be removed. This plan is what is proposed, trees left over, and trees to be planted. So that's what the landscape will be.
So both what's going to be left and what's going to be added is shown on
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
the
does that
one that
make
you handed
sense?
out for us. Okay.
Yeah,
That's helpful, thank you.
okay.
Can you, either you or, where is I don't have any plans on the proposal I have, but where is the wetland?
Oh, it's right
Or
here
a plan
off of the,
showing the wetland?
off of the circle.
Because our purview for this is specifically that wetland area, correct?
Fill right here, yep.
That's all we have.
It's 600 something square feet, I think, of fill is what's proposed. So if this is the existing conditions plan, it looks like probably there will be fill here and maybe one tree removed from the actual wetland, it looks like, or two, sorry.
Probably a
For
bunch
sheet
of
C4, I
understory.
don't know if you have the whole set, or,
Okay, maybe she does.
It was put up on the
right there.
website.
So that plan shows you the wetland impact area shaded gray,
Okay.
and it's 609 square feet.
And it's not big enough to have a buffer that is jurisdictional, correct? So it's
Correct.
just the wetland here, and that's why DES gets involved.
Right, when it's filled. Yeah.
I think you already answered this question, but I'm just gonna, asphalt because of the intention to plow, is that why they didn't consider making it some other surface?
Correct. Yep.
Let's follow up to that. So winter maintenance on that area is going to include plowing. Is there salting? I mean, do you have a winter maintenance plan somewhere?
We don't, because that would be turned over to the school department for their maintenance. So the job at hand for us is to build it.
Yeah, that's a problem, huh? So could you put that in notes somewhere or whatever? Like just in the plan notes? Just so somebody,
I think you would make a recommendation, I guess. I mean, I can't bind future conditions. Mr. McNabb is building this off-site improvement to satisfy the condition of a planning board approval for 581 Lafayette. He's not going to maintain it. So to put things on the plan regarding maintenance, I mean, there's some notes about maintaining the planted material so that it takes, but beyond that, he's not responsible, and wouldn't want to put things on there without the school department's blessing. Does that make sense? I mean, you can certainly, as a city board, you can make a recommendation that there be a plan in the future and that they come to you, but our job is to build it. I mean, is to get it approved and build it, We're not going to maintain it.
Okay, well, have to figure it out, I guess, but yeah, if you can make a recommendation, that would be great. It's kind of a gap.
Yeah. You know, both salt and like where to store the snow, right? Those are the two things that we'd want to,
Snow storage and,
yeah.
I think it's like a driveway. It would be just plowed off, to be honest with you. Snow would just be plowed off.
Just along
To
the
the
sides.
side.
Yeah. And then the basketball court is getting improved too, huh? I noticed.
Yeah, right now there's a hoop down there, and as part of that circle, doesn't get a whole lot of traffic, so part of the improvements is going to be to improve that basketball experience at the circle.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's nice to see the whole plan. Thank you for explaining the planting and the landscaping a little bit more.
Sure, you're welcome. Understand your concern. A lot of trees being cut, but
any more questions?
I don't really have a question for the applicant, but it's more just about our jurisdiction here. I mean, a lot of our commentary came because of the appropriateness of the plan in general, but I feel like our hands are kind of tied on some of those things, that we don't really have purview over those. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, the jurisdiction is really only in that 600 square feet of fill. We can either make a recommendation that they approve filling it with conditions that it be a certain type of fill, or there's a certain material being put on top of the fill, maybe, or that a certain tree is replanted somewhere else if it has to be taken out of that area of fill. It's really limited what, with the conditions that are in that 600 square feet, what we can do to improve that 600 square feet.
Yeah, or not fill it and have another alternative, but he's spoken to the alternatives at this point, so.
Right, or you can recommend denial because it's, I don't know, whatever you would think.
Yeah, unfortunately, our purview is really small for this, and, you know, it's been to Trees and Greenery, which is great, but it is hard when, we're only have say over this one small piece, and we weren't, you know, part of the this whole process, like, much earlier, which we voiced to the city before. That's happened in several other projects where I feel like we kind of see it at the very end, and we don't really have a lot of say.
Right.
But that's, unfortunately where we are again here with this one.
Thank you.
So I guess given that, is there anything that we would recommend for that 600 square feet? Like, I mean, I think what I heard from Peter was that he felt like it was just sort of receiving runoff, you know, it's a little bit of a sort of a stormwater feature, which is, you know, serving a value and a purpose. Like, do we think there needs to be like a little pipe running under the path in that place, or fill that's a little bit more porous so that there is still that water flow function? I don't know.
I don't feel like I have enough knowledge to.
Yeah, you got something? Yeah.
well, if I can answer the.
Yeah.
So on page P1, the profile shows the pipe under the walkway at that wetland to maintain the flow back and forth. So there
Okay,
is a
so
pipe.
that it's there. Okay,
And
thank
the
you for
tree
pointing that
removal
out.
plan shows that in the wetland area, there's one 8-inch maple that's coming out. That's the only tree.
And just a bunch of understory, probably.
Invasive, really, and some dead trees that have been killed by the invasives.
Our packet is just 30 pages, but I don't trust you.
Go on the website had a more revised version, but it might not have been sent to the iPads in time.
I think it's actually just the opposite.
It's the
I think the
opposite,
people
yeah.
on the iPads have it, but
Yeah,
the
I have
website
it.
doesn't have it.
That's where I ran into a problem.
Oh, yeah, I downloaded it from the website. I didn't see it.
Yeah. Oops.
Question? Oh, okay. It looked like you did. If there's no other questions, someone like to make a motion?
I will make a motion that we recommend approval for the 581 Lafayette Road High School walking path, with a recommendation that there be some sort of plan considered for snow storage and winter maintenance for the school to have on hand.
Second.
Discussion?
So, Kate, do you have any suggestions on how we can do that with the school?
I think we can definitely put it on the letter, but I can take that directly to the school facilities manager and see if we can request sort of a different type of maintenance for that specific path, such as like using sand over salt in the winter and maybe shoveling instead of plowing. I'm trying to do some lower impact stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, I can talk to you about it a little, because probably, yeah, might not want sand, but figure it out.
Did we have a second? Did someone, you think, okay.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say my reservations have to do with things outside of our purview, and I just feel like this is an extremely heavy-handed proposal that has a lot of tree removals, and although we don't have jurisdiction over those things, we're seeing it just the same. It's kind of how I felt the first time around, and so I'm gonna have a hard time voting for this one.
Thank you.
It's taking a natural area and making it very built, basically.
Are we ready for a vote? Okay, so this is a motion to recommend approval, correct? Okay. All right, all in favor? And just keep your hands up.
1, 2, 3. Okay.
And then against?
1, 2,
3. And then abstain? Brian, yeah, Brian.
Oh,
abstained.
Sorry. I was doing it good earlier and then I lost track.
Okay. So what are we?
So it's 3-3, which is a
What does that
tie,
mean?
which I think
What is the
fails.
rules? A split vote means the motion fails, according to our rules and procedures. So if a motion, okay.
So if the motion to approve fails, it's automatically denied. So we'd be recommending
So
denial
we're recommending denial.
to
Okay.
NHDES.
That's what it is. Right? Yep. Okay.
This is basically just going to DES,
Right.
Yeah.
right? It's not going to the planning board.
Right.
So the denial recommendation does not come with any proposed conditions.
I mean, it doesn't need to because it's just a denial.
Right.
But
It says you don't.
I don't think the maintenance comment would be applicable in a denial letter.
Yeah.
So it might
Right.
just go to the school department in the sense, if it gets approved by DES. I'll make sure that the school facility manager.
Do we write a letter with our comments to accompany this?
To explain why it was denied.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that would be helpful to have a reason.
All right, so do we need to vote to write the letter like we did for the last one?
Yeah, I don't think you technically need to vote. I mean, I can capture it with the discussion that we've had that,
Okay.
concern about the fill and the porous of the soil, concern about the impact to trees and the surrounding areas.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. two that we postponed, right? So we are
Yep.
on to other business. So starting with sustainability fair tabling, which Lynn has so graciously accepted to table for us.
If anybody wants to come hang out with me, even just half an hour, it's a fun event.
Have you gotten what you need?
Yeah, I'm hoping Kate's going to help me out with a few things.
Yes, what do you need?
I mean, I think the things that are on my short list are that lovely thing that Barbara created, the little model garden is so fun. I think the map is the other really popular thing that shows the wetlands. And maybe there were 2 maps, I'm forgetting exactly, but I think any kind of a map is engaging to people that, I think those are like the 2 big things. And then I think you were just gonna like look around, and if you had some other stuff, you could send it on my way, you know what I mean? Like
Sounds
whatever.
good.
You know, Allison would have this like amazing like layout of, you know, brochures about lawn care, brochures about pollinators, and she took all of that, I think.
Well, I think we should hire her back.
I know. So if anybody has anything like they really like, I'd be happy to like just find a printer and get them printed. If you have something that you think is really
I think you would.
pointed, but
Is there internet access?
I am not sure. I'm going to work on that this evening to
It'd be so cool if
clarify.
someone could be like, you could put in their address and like show them
Yeah.
exactly
Right.
where they are.
that's what we wanted to do last year.
Okay.
I will
I
work
have,
on
like,
it. I will do
hotspot,
my
but I
best.
don't even have hotspot capabilities on my
Yeah.
phone.
And
That's
just
only
on the
thing.
pollinator point, New
Yeah.
Hampshire Pollinator Pathways will be there, so there will be
Yeah,
a group.
so I could point them to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the only thing that I thought would be extra, that would be cool, is to specifically show someone their property or a property they were curious about.
I
Maybe I
will.
could do it with phones, you know, like,
I'll see what I can do.
yeah.
Or if someone had an iPad that was on a data plan.
Oh, that's,
I don't have that, but
and our city ones aren't.
no.
What time are people allowed to go set up?
Anytime after 3:30. School buses are usually out around 3:30. So, but the fair doesn't start till 4:30, so we should have an hour.
Yeah. And Kate, if you're not going to be there, let's coordinate. I can come pick stuff up and
Okay, that'd
try
be
to make it
great.
easy on you.
Yeah, because I was gonna just hand Peter a bag of stuff, but
He doesn't, like, this is going to be a
that
lot.
might be too much stuff. Because he only has a little Prius, so I don't know how much he can fit.
It's the diorama.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah, it's a diorama. That
It's
thing's heavy.
the diorama.
Yeah, maybe tomorrow if you're free.
Okay.
That'd be great.
What time when did we have it last year? What time of day was it? It was
Last year it was on a Sunday, actually, and
Was
we did
daytime.
it more like midday. The first year we did it on a Friday, and we had about 500 people in attendance. Last year we did it on Sunday. The library had done a survey, and the result of that survey suggested that people wanted to see more programming on Sundays, which is why we did it on Sunday, but we noticed that there were less families there last year because Sunday felt like a hard time with sports and just family activities and things, so we shifted back to Friday again, and also for some exhibitors, they expressed Sunday was a harder time to get volunteers to come man tables, so we shifted back to Friday, see what happens this year.
I like Friday. I think it's a good change.
I like that.
It's easier.
It does fit your weekend.
Can I blurt out one other idea?
Yeah.
Just briefly, I have this like desire to do a little cleanup at, along the trails at the end of Jones Ave behind the high school. There's a lot of like little pieces of plastic in the,
Oh, there's so much trash.
in the woods, you know, just in the wood chips that are put out there. I don't know if anybody, I think we could keep it really simple, like just get a small group and put out a word and just do it. You know, like, I don't know if there's anybody else who would be interested in like helping me organize that.
Got 2 groups waiting
Do
for
you?
a project, and I just hadn't figured one
Let's
out.
do that.
Alonzo wants to do a cleanup again, and Walmart of Newington. They have monthly required volunteer hours that they have to hit.
yeah.
So,
Well, and it's, I
They
mean,
are
if you
interested.
could go all the way up along Route 1 there, like by the dinner horn, and like,
Oh,
there is a
yeah.
lot of trash up there too.
that's a great idea.
Yeah, they're kind of 2 different areas, but they're all, you can tell like a big story too. Okay. This is a good time of year to do it, you know, before things get too,
Green.
Yeah, it's like nice and open, so it's easy to see stuff. And
How do you feel about May 8th or May 15th?
I love it. Let's get specific.
That's when the Lawns of Volunteers could
Yeah.
do it, from like 9 to noon.
They want
on-
to do like a weekday kind of thing.
Yeah, on
probably,
either
right?
the 8th or the 15th, which were Thursday mornings. And I was hesitant to say Great Bog again, because that's what we did last year with them. But I went out to Great Bog 2 weeks ago, and the trails were pretty fine, so we don't really need to clean them up. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think if it works for you, I can help promote it and probably come for at least a little bit.
Now you're talking, okay. Yeah, let me know if either of those dates work, and we will get it on the calendar.
I can't come, but I know where there's tons of trash in that
Point it
park,
out,
so like, we want to go for a
Yeah.
walk sometime.
Like the Jones Ave Trails, is that what you're
Yes.
thinking too?
Yes, there's like
Yeah.
massive amounts of trash in some spots.
Yeah. There's like covered landfill there too.
Yeah, I'm not talking about.
That's a different conversation.
Yeah. And so I know we're over time already, but I don't know the process of this, but I would be interested in the commission meeting or something in some way to discuss some of the gray area in some of our rules and guidelines and things. It feels like recently, for various reasons, there's questions about the consistency of how we're making decisions at times, and I feel like for us, it might be helpful to spend some time and kind of look at that together and see how we move forward so that it's more clear to each of us, but also to the public and to the applications about our expectations. I don't know how we do that moving forward. To be honest, I know typically when there's a quorum, it needs to be a public meeting. I think it would be helpful if we could speak more candidly about some things, and that might be harder to do as a public meeting, so I don't know the right protocol for that. But I don't know what other commissioners think about that, and if that would be of value to you as well. So that's just something that I've been thinking about recently.
No, I think there'd be a value in that.
I do too.
Agreed.
And I do agree with you that I don't know how we do it, but so it's not, broadcast.
Right, so we talked about this a little bit this morning, and if we wanted to make it a non-public, it might be a little bit harder because you have to justify that under a legal ruling as to why it would be non-public. So if it was considering like one specific property and
What about if you call it a training session? Does it have to be
it would
public?
have to be publicized and recorded. So I don't know if we would want to mention specific properties or applicants to try to get a discussion going, but it might benefit us to have a public meeting, but try to mention neighborhoods or maybe not specific applicants, be more vague. I don't know if that would hinder it, and if that's the case, then we should probably try to find a way to do a non-public, which we can look into with the legal department, how to set that up.
I feel like it would be more fruitful, at least for me, if we could just be candid
Yeah.
and not trying to be vague and get.
Yeah.
There are requirements, though, right, Kate,
There
for
are
a non-public
requirements.
that I don't know if it would,
Right.
right?
For going into a non-public, you have to meet a certain threshold as to why it needs to be privatized. And I don't think, if it's past applicants, that might not be, it might not meet that threshold because we've already seen public applications from them. But I'll have to ask and see if there's some way that we can justify a non-public.
Do you want to mention about what the planning board, what you heard about? planning
Well,
board?
so, and I'm not clear on this, but I know I've heard through city, just whatever, that the planning board is potentially scheduling a retreat of some sort or something, or has tried in the past. I don't know if that's a public thing. I don't know if there's an opportunity for us to do something similar that might.
Ooh, that would be nice. Yeah.
Allow for some discussion.
Yeah, I'll have to ask about
Where are we
that.
going to go?
Yeah. I know the planning board, right now, they're doing a lot of work sessions. And one of the things that the chair wants to talk about is the wetland sections, of Article 10. And we've mentioned as staff to the chair that we would like to have a joint work session if possible when they come to that subject. That hasn't been confirmed, but we're trying to keep it in their ear that we want to be a part of any discussion about Article 10 if they have a work session on that.
Are those work sessions publicized and
Those are, yeah,
broadcast?
they usually sit down here and go around the table.
Because we made all those recommendations, right, for Article 10? And
We did, yep,
They're
we
still
have
considering
a
them?
redlined version. I'm not sure what they're considering. I think it is just the chair right now. But the last I remember with those edits that we had is that we had a co-meeting and they didn't do anything with our edits. I don't think they really reacted to them. So it probably would be beneficial to bring our edits back for a second look if we're thinking of potential changes, or if they are. Because I think we had some good stuff the last time we looked at it.
Yeah, I think we should look at what qualifies for non-public and see if there's any way we can,
Try to get that on the
Yeah.
books soon. Rather than later.
yeah, any way that we can, you know, if we're discussing past applications and how we voted on them, which I know that's all public, but then, you know, to allow commissioners to maybe talk about, you know, I voted this way, but I was struggling with it, and like, is that information, you know, I just don't want to open up a can of worms with past applications if we're trying to really use that to really only better future applications and future decision-making.
Yeah, you don't want it to be taken the wrong way if someone watches it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know how you can spin that to make that a non-public, but can it fall under one of those?
Yeah. We'll see what legal says.
Things.
Hopefully there's something that we can do. But the alternative would just be to have it public. And if we're uncomfortable mentioning specific applications, we try to make it vague, but
Scenario A.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But we'll see
If
what
it
we can
were
do.
to, like, I'm sure all of us are in favor of as much transparency as there can be. That's a requirement. If we did it as a public session, and I think maybe this is the sentiment, I would just be concerned that it couldn't be as very structured as like the commission is, because it's more of a free-form discussion and opinions and such. And I would be concerned that the public would see it and feel like it was kind of a unplanned free-for-all. And it would, to my way of thinking, it would maybe dilute their appearance of.
Yeah, like, does this commission even know what they're talking about?
You know what
We're
I'm
just kind of
saying?
spitballing ideas.
Yeah, so, you know, to be clear, I would want them to know all of the stuff. I don't want to ever withhold or be anything but transparent. But as we're saying,
Process.
sometimes you have to have something that's very candid and open and free-flowing, but that gives the appearance of unstructured in an environment that is otherwise quite structured, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I guess if it had to be public, I guess what I'm saying in a long-winded way is if it had to be public, or if it should be public and there's not an option to do it appropriately, otherwise, I think we would have to make it sufficiently structured, even though that might curb some of the open dialogue, just to avoid sending a message of concern that wouldn't really need to be there.
Is there a scenario where it's a publicized meeting, but it's not recorded, like our site walks?
So people who have to attend in person?
Yeah. I mean, and frankly, I'd be okay with a couple extra people being there.
Yeah,
It's
agreed.
more the
Yeah.
recording that's the.
Yeah,
It doesn't have to be recorded, but the minutes have to be publicized. So the minutes would summarize
That'd even be better, because it's people taking sound bites too that are, you know,
Yeah, let me double check about the recording. I don't think it needs to be because that's what the minutes are for, and the recording's just extra, but I'll double check.
We never used to, so.
Right, yeah.
Way back when.
We have minutes for the site walk, so that makes sense.
Would just be good to know if there is some sort of specific approach to having internal dialogues about the efficiency of the commission that's not discussion about public properties or anything else. I guess I won't be surprised either way. If there isn't, or maybe there's something that I'm just not familiar with.
Yeah, I feel like other boards and commissions and committees could potentially like benefit from an opportunity to just kind of review things.
So if it was public but not recorded, that would be preferable if we couldn't do a non-public?
I would think so, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
does anyone else have any other business before we adjourn?
Just one
Yeah.
quick item, and of course, you know this, Sam. I just wanted to say, you'll recall that we were having the discussion about we needed another alternate, and there was some urgency, particularly when we're so happy that Stuart is back. But there was one meeting when you weren't here that we weren't sure whether we were going to
It wasn't good.
be able to conduct a session, and we didn't know ahead, so we said we need to have either a better process or an ongoing process for making sure we have our appropriate alternates. And I had a candidate come to me through the Portsmouth page who's a very qualified individual, works on this exact kind of stuff. I met with that individual and fits the mold in terms of personality and a good, appropriate balance, but very informed on all of this. And I know he had a discussion with you, and I believe that where that sits is the mayor's consideration, and then if he wishes to move that forward, it would go to the council for consideration. But the point is, there's at least one very interested, qualified candidate that may be going through the process. And as an aside, in an appropriate manner, I just happen to know that his mother is on the trees and greenery. And not that we could work through back channels. My point is simply that might give us the opportunity to say, hey, we're seeing things that we don't know if you guys are seeing. Could we maybe get together and have an appropriate public discussion about how to be more effective in both regards?
That's great. I was going to say, too, I talked to the arborist who is on the Trees and Greenery Committee the other day, and he had said that he would like to attend some of our meetings at some point, and so.
I think it would be great.
so great.
Anything we could do to form a little bit of an appropriate connection to that group so we understand each other and can reflect in our own meetings, that would be great. I have to admit that's kind of an anomaly to me, and whenever they make decisions on trees, I never know. I guess I can just go look, right, at all the deliberation and such. Anyway, so we'll say fingers crossed on having an alternate soon.
Yeah, I think he's just waiting to be put on the agenda is the last I heard, to be voted upon, I guess.
I believe he also knows Talia well, and I think he knew you.
Kate.
Yeah, I went to high school with him.
Yeah.
Just so there's- I guess my point is, he's a pretty known entity, which is always good when you're adding somebody.
All the more reason, though, why we need a little retreat.
Right?
Right,
Fall
yeah.
on board and,
New member.
yeah.
Anything else? All right.
I make
Yeah.
one last plug.
Okay.
Just so nobody forgets, April 23rd, which is 2 Wednesdays from now, is our special presentation from Mark West with the updates to the delineation, well, not the delineation, but the wetland mapping.
Yeah.
And he's got his presentation figured out. We talked this morning, and he's going to go through a lot of stuff on how he did it, how the old one was pretty inaccurate, and we're going to see like really close-up differences of how wetland mapping changed across the city, which will be really cool.
Cool.
And that's
So
4 to 6
Normal
here
time,
or in conference?
in here, we'll probably sit down there just so we can have like a more informal discussion with him and back and forth. But it probably won't take the full 2 hours.
Awesome. Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.
There you go.
Thank you.